So the main goal of this series is to test out as many games as possible, and the reason why I decided to do that is my dissatisfaction at how the vast majority of game performance tests, device gaming tests are being performed. Most of these tests don't show the full picture. Barely any test does show you the internal temperature. Barely anyone is showing the CPU or GPU utilization, or both. In my case here I'll try to show both. We don't really get to see what's actually happening under the hood of the device, so we can't really draw a conclusion whether the game is broken or whether the device is actually underpowered. And unfortunately, in today's mobile gaming, a lot of mobile games are very poorly coded, as this series will show you down the road. And my main goal is to show the true picture, show the real reason why a game runs well or why a game doesn't run well. That's my main goal, and hopefully tests like this test will be kind of the norm in the future, since it really does show a lot more info. Now, I also plan to add a lot more stats in the next video. For example, I want to add how much power the chipset is using, how many watts, and things like that. Every single detail that I can add, I will add, because I want this to be as transparent as possible and as detailed as possible. That is my goal. Now, I will be performing the tests on a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, or also known as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 leading version, which is a slightly overclocked version of the 8 Gen 2, and it can be found on the Galaxy S23 lineup, and it can be found on some Red Magic phones. Now, the GPU is the Adreno 1040, which is at the moment the third most powerful mobile GPU ever to be made. The first two are the Adreno 1050 in the 8 Gen 3, and the Dimensity 9300 is the strongest mobile GPU at the moment. Unfortunately, they don't sell those phones in my region, so I don't have access to a Dimensity phone, but hopefully in the future I can get my hands on that as well. Now, the applications that I'll be using today will be the simple system monitor, the CPU float, and some other built-in applications that I find very useful. You can also take a look at the Snapdragon 8 Plus or Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 details on the right side of the screen, in the middle of the screen, basically showing you the applications that I'll be using, the applications happening under the hood of your device. Very accurate and very useful, which is the reason why I'm using them. Now, I've noticed, unfortunately, the simple system monitor is no longer on the Play Store. I don't know what happened, which kind of sucks, because the simple system monitor is literally the most accurate monitoring application on Android. Nothing is close to simple system monitor. I've been using it for over a decade, but don't worry, you can still find the application from the browser, and I'll show you how to do that. But if you want to replicate the test with your own device, I will give you all the necessary application names that you have to install for a very accurate test, and you can find the simple system monitor over here on APK Pure, which honestly is, I would say, the best place where you can find apps or programs that are not available on the Play Store. The other one is the CPU float. Very useful, since it gives you the CPU frequency, GPU load, GPU frequency, temperature, battery temperature, voltage, everything, which is also a thing that I will be using today. And basically, these are the applications that I also use on other tests. And the built-in Samsung stuff, perf_z, will show us a double of the CPU load, the GPU load, and also temperature. So as many details and as many stats as possible. Also, a very important window that will be shown on other games, the GPU watch. Now this will give you the API, frame rate, memory usage, and things like that. I'll primarily use this for the API and for the resolution, since a lot of games have custom resolutions. Some of them run in 720p, 920p, some run in native resolution. This application built-in will show us the exact thing, and you can also customize to even more if you want, but I use this primarily for API, which is going to be very important, and for resolution as well as sometimes for frame rate. I like to have 3 different frame rate monitors so we can get the most accurate one. So for the game that I'll be playing today has a very accurate frame rate monitor, so it's not really necessary to have the app here enabled, since the in-game is doing the thing just fine. And for Samsung users, if you want full performance, you have to enable this option. A lot of tests done with Samsung phones have this option here disabled, which limits frame rate, limits performance, and it leads to some very bad results, and it does lead to some very inaccurate conclusions. To the conclusion being that the 8 Gen 2 or 8 Gen 3 in Samsung phones, for example, is not good, which is false, because this 8 Gen 2 is going to perform as any other 8 Gen 2 out there in any other device. So let's actually hop in the game that I wanted to talk about and the game that I'll be playing today. I decided to start with a game that's actually a proper benchmark, a game that I would say is one of the most GPU demanding games that we have on mobile at the moment, War Thunder Mobile. Now, this game runs in Vulkan, has phenomenal Vulkan support, has ray tracing, and is a game where you can flex your GPU muscles on your device. Basically, if you want a good GPU benchmark, this is the game that I recommend that you try out. Barely any lag. The developers did a very good job with this game, and this is the game that is most likely going to open the eyes of all of players to demand Vulkan support, because as you will see in some other videos, Vulkan is just amazing when it comes to performance. And here you can take a look at the settings. Now I'll play the game with ray tracing enabled and ray tracing disabled, just to show you all the difference that you can expect in the fluctuation and some of the other interesting things about the chipset and about the game here. So these are my stats, everything maxed out, ray tracing on, and well, it will be on and will be off. If you play the game competitively, I think you will have ray tracing disabled, and honestly the frame rate is just amazing so far. I've been playing the game for 1 year, and the 8 Gen 2 performs much better than my older device. My older device was a Snapdragon 870, which unfortunately met its demise when the GPU burned because of playing this game. But I plan to fix that thing, and I plan to keep on using it. But we are in the first battle here. Frame rate is well over 100. Now the game does fluctuate, and that's because of my recorder. Since I wasn't able to get my PC to record the phone screen, I decided, well, let's just go and record with the device itself. And the recorder does run on the GPU, and it does eat about 20 FPS, but honestly I don't think that's going to matter much. The main thing that we want to check out here is the game performance and game optimization. So far the frame rate is really good. So far, I mean, this game is very smooth, and if you have a high power device you will enjoy the frame rate in this game. That's a fact. On the right side we can see that Vulkan is doing a very good job allocating resources to all 8 cores, and the reason why Vulkan is so good, the Vulkan actually makes the GPU do the heavy lifting, and it enables all cores on the system, whether it being on a console or PC or a mobile device. Vulkan is a cross-platform API, and it does the same thing on all platforms, on all devices, which is a good thing. It reduces temperature, it improves performance, and it just makes games run much better. For example, on my prehistoric PC, I used to play Doom 2016 on 60 FPS. Now I can get well over 180 with Vulkan. Just for an example on the PC side of things. Same thing is also easily applied to mobile devices. This game, in the early phases of development, back in beta, closed beta, was running in OpenGL, and players were struggling to hit 30 FPS on medium-low settings with a high-power device. Now it just flies. I mean, you can see the frame rate yourself. The Vulkan is just magic, and if this game was still in OpenGL, we would be suffering. We wouldn't be playing, obviously, since the game would run very poorly. And that's the reason why most games on mobile nowadays are performing so poorly. It's because of the API and the developers' lack of care when it comes to optimizing the game, or when it comes to optimizing nowadays. I don't know why why very few developers go with Vulkan. Vulkan is just much superior to OpenGL, and that's just full stop there. There is no arguing. Vulkan is simply better. It's been available for 7-8 years now, but unfortunately very few games are running in Vulkan, and that's the reason why games just run so poorly. Temperature of the GPU is 70 degrees Celsius, battery temperature is 20 degrees Celsius. Now, one funny thing that I also seen a lot of game test reviewers do, they never measure internal temperature, which you can see right here, the GPU temperature. They never measure that. They use those thermometers and they measure the exterior temperature, which is honestly the funniest and most pointless thing that I've ever seen, because that's like measuring your car's engine temperature by, I don't know, measuring the hood or measuring the roof of your car. Absolutely pointless. You have to rely on the internal sensors, on the internal temperature. So that's why I have all these things up and running. The GPU load is full speed, 719 MHz, which is the full speed the 8 Gen 2 can achieve. The 8 Gen 2, also the normal 8 Gen 2, the non-overclocked one, is around 780 MHz, which does sometimes make a little difference, but in the grand scale, 5 FPS up, 5 FPS down, it's not really noticeable. I am one of those people who will notice a small fluctuation in FPS, but for the most part, most will not notice a difference between the 8 Plus Gen 2 and the classic 8 Gen 2. Both are really good, so whichever, if you have one of these, both will just run well. Battery temperature is slowly climbing, which is fine. The battery is pretty chill. The GPU is running at 70 degrees, 72, 73, which is about the optimal temperature that you can expect. Now, for a lot of people, for a lot of players, this might seem like shocking, and if you see this for the first time yourself, don't be alarmed. That's basically the normal operating temperature for a smartphone device, tablet. You don't have to worry about that temperature. It's normal. It's actually normal. That's the thing that you see people say 50 degrees CPU. That's false. That's the battery. That's the battery temperature, not the CPU or GPU. CPU and GPU temperature is much higher usually when under load, and it does fluctuate much faster. The battery temperature usually is slowly going up or slowly going down because of the positioning inside of the device. But the CPU or GPU that's constantly working is going to have some big fluctuations when it comes to the heat. And don't be alarmed, as long as it doesn't go over 80, 90, it should be good. Now the RAM usage is showing the total RAM usage of the whole device, has 8 GB. Currently 78 is used. War Thunder Mobile is using on average 2.5 to 3 GB of RAM, which is okay I guess for the game. Again, fairly well optimized, so don't use a lot, it doesn't use a lot of RAM, which is again a good thing. GPU still going full speed, frame rate's been amazing. I have absolutely no complaints about the frame rate so far. It's smooth, absolutely smooth. Now people ask me why don't I play the game on 120 FPS. Well, usually, I mean, I don't really need that frame rate. When it comes to this game, since it's a tactical game, I value tactics over frame rate. I play tactical, so 60 or 120, it's not going to make much of a difference to me. But I have to admit, 120 FPS is super smooth, buttery smooth, and once you get used to it, I can understand why a lot of people can go back to lower refresh rate displays. CPUs are also doing their thing. As I mentioned before, Vulkan allocates load to all 8 cores, which does reduce heat and improves performance dramatically. Now, I don't want to go off topic too much, because in some instances, as you will see in the future tests, OpenGL usually uses at most 4 cores, but that's very rare. OpenGL usually runs at 1 or 2 cores, which can actually create a significant bottleneck. However, that's a artificial bottleneck, not because the CPU can handle it, but because the API and the game itself is coded not to use more than 2 or 3 cores, which is unfortunately a huge problem when it comes to the open world games. And this technically is also a open world game. It's fairly large maps, but as you can see, absolutely no lag at all. Sometimes you might actually experience a little frame drop at the start. That's normal. That's just how the game works. While being very well optimized, the game does have occasional problems here and there, but on the grand scale of things, that's nothing compared to what other games presented to us. You will see that in some other videos again. I plan to play a lot of games, and I plan to show you as much as I can. Also important, I forgot to mention that, you can see the time on the little window on the right. That's basically how long I've been playing the game, and you can also see the stability of the chip, stability of the GPU, if we see any thermal throttling, if that even exists on this device. So yeah, running on a Samsung Galaxy S23, not the Ultra, not the Plus, but the base model. And let me tell you, the Ultra and the Plus are way too expensive for my taste. Even this device was expensive, but I honestly kind of like the smaller device, small form factor. But again, any 8th Gen 2 device that you pick is going to get the job done without much of a problem. And also one thing that the reviewers also get wrong, you don't get different performance on the same chip on various different devices. Performance is literally the same on all devices. That's why when I do a test, I don't say the device's name, because the device's name is not really important. The chip inside is important. The chip is the most important thing. Now, of course, the manufacturer can place some limits to artificially limit performance. In this case, for Samsung, in my case actually, Samsung Galaxy Optimizer service can crypt performance. It artificially limits the the frame rate and the heat output and the power usage. But you can disable that. And when you disable that, it performs just as any other 8th Gen 2 device, which is something that I see a lot of other reviewers miss. They leave the optimization service enabled and they say bad phone, bad performance, while it's not the case. And again, I actually thought someone would point that out. Very few did. So as a wise man once said, if you want to get something done, you have to do it yourself, and here I am making the video about it. Well, I mean, be the judge of the frame rate. I would say it was really smooth and really stable. Honestly, running this game, recording and running the game at the same time at 120 FPS is quite impressive, since again, this game will show you your GPU, your phone's GPU muscles. This is a fantastic GPU test. Not because I just play the game and have fun with it, but honestly, on a technological scale, this game is the real deal. If you want to test performance, do it on this game, because it actually shows a huge difference between generations. Or in some cases, it doesn't show a huge difference in generations. And honestly, for a cross-platform comparison, this game is also really good, since it is well optimized for every single operating system that we have on a mobile platform at the moment. Which is interesting, because some devices have some HD quality in the options. Well, in my case, I also have that enabled by default. That's why you don't see that option. It's enabled by default. I had the option to download. I downloaded, the game told me if you want to switch, I swapped, I switched, and yeah, the game is running in those HD graphics, by the way. Which does increase the resolution, and I guess that's it. That's resolution. I think some settings are a bit enhanced, which honestly is fine. Good for a test at the same time. 31 minutes into the test. Of course, in the video here it will be a bit shorter, but been playing for 31 minutes. GPU temperature been 72 degrees. Honestly, it's not bad. It's really good temperature. My older device used to get to 90, 92, 93 degrees Celsius, which was a bit warm, but at the same time that was a Snapdragon 870. So when it comes to overall efficiency and performance on the 8th Gen 2, they definitely did not lie about this chip. It's very efficient. I think that this is at the moment the most efficient chip that there is. So obviously I expect low temperatures, and honestly I did see low temperatures comparing to all the previous devices that I used. The GPU load is 100%. It to be expected. Frame rate 89, 97. No, the frame rate is actually very interesting, because the GPU has different speeds. Sometimes it goes full speed, sometimes it does let go of the throttle a little bit, which is fine. I think that's the, what was it called again? Smart management system at work, that aims to deliver smoothest performance, but at the same time it also aims to not cause too much heating. And I think for someone who's playing games, in my case over here, I never really cared too much about power usage on my PC or phone. As long as I get good frame rate, I really did not care how much power or how much battery something is been using. So for me, if I can disable that option, I will, just to go full speed. And of course I get wrecked by the artillery, because in this game I don't have luck. I mean, I think I'm playing good. I've been playing the game for a year now. I think I'm playing good. But man, let me tell you, if the snail doesn't like you, you will have a very bad day. I mean, I'm joking, of course, but man, the game can make someone angry. That's for sure. This game boils my blood, but it's fun. It's a very good game, and the developers did a very good job with it. Very good job with War Thunder here. 76 degrees Celsius. Okay, we are getting there. We are getting there. Temperature is slowly going up, which is normal. Battery at 24. Now I think I started at like 16 degrees Celsius. Now the battery is at 24. Do you see how slowly the battery temperature rises compared to the GPU temperature? Now next time I will try to get the CPU temperature up and running on a different game. The reason why I don't have a CPU temperature monitor here is because the CPU is really not doing much. All 8 cores are running in harmony, which means that the heat output is minimal. And the CPU is 30-40 degrees Celsius at once. It's on default values. The GPU is what's doing all the work in this game, so the GPU temperature monitor obviously has much greater priority. And so far the frame rate on this map is also really decent. Again, does go up and down. That's because of the smart management. And of course I have to also mention this again before I forget. The recorder that I use is also doing some tricks to my frame rate. Basically it reduces the frame rate by 20 FPS. I actually measured it. It reduces the frame rate by 20 FPS, and again, not really relevant to the performance test. After all, I think we already have seen that this game is performing flawlessly. I mean, this is one of those games where I get 100% FPS stability when I'm playing, when I'm not recording. 100% stability, which for this game of this magnitude and with how heavy it actually is, that's damn impressive. All thanks to the Vulkan API allowing the GPU to do all the work. One of the few games where that GPU that you have in your high-end device actually does something. You will see that's not the case in a lot of other so-called graphically demanding games. This game is a jewel. This game is a diamond when it comes to optimization, fun factor, and how good the game in general is. That's why I decided to start with this game. It's an example that other game developers should honestly take, because if every single developer did something similar to what Gaijin did with War Thunder Mobile, we would have every single game run in a very similar way here. Since mobile devices nowadays are very fast, they have very fast GPUs. Not to achieve this level of FPS on current generation devices, it's a shame, honestly. It's really a shame, and again, that's why I'm here to make this video, to show you what I'm talking about and to get to the bottom of things, since I'm really dissatisfied with how much false is out there. So I'm here to hopefully in one way or the other show what's the real problem, why some games don't run well at all. Well, in this case, this is the opposite. This is a game that really runs well, a really demanding game. And again, take a note of all the stats, temperature, GPU, CPU, all that. Down the road in the next videos, it is going to be very important to compare the API and stuff like that. So, now that was me playing with ray tracing disabled. Let's turn ray tracing on and now let's see how the frame rate will do now. I noticed something very odd with ray tracing on this device. When I change the setting and when I enter the battle immediately, sometimes it knows to glitch out, and that's on the game. So if you do use ray tracing in this game, I recommend that you reboot the game, restart the game, and then when you do that, the bugs go away, then it starts to work as intended. Now, how much does the ray tracing impact the performance? Well, it really depends on your device. The best device with ray tracing performance, with enabled ray tracing performance, is, believe it or not, Exynos 2100 and Exynos 2400. Exynos chipsets really do well when it comes to games with enabled ray tracing, because those AMD GPUs in those phones are meant to do that, and they just have much superior ray tracing performance to the competition, and that's just a fact. I've seen tests, proper tests with AMD GPU on the Exynos 2400, and it outperformed the Dimensity and it outperformed the Adreno 750 easily. With that device, over 100 FPS with that chipset, quite easily, with no issues. On my end here, I get about 70, 80, sometimes 90, 60. It usually goes around these values, which is very similar, almost actually shockingly identical to the ray tracing performance that we usually see on the 8th Gen 3. Now, ray tracing in this game is nice to have, and I see the difference. The difference is there, but I don't really think the difference is worth to sacrifice all that frame rate. I mean, speaking of difference in frame rate, if you attempt to do this with an iPhone, for example, it's not gonna end well. This game really shows differences between the shaders, between the memory bandwidth, frequency, the GPU size. It really shows what GPU is faster. The iPhone 15 Pro Max, from what I've seen, struggles with this game, really struggles with this game. Seen it run 30-40 FPS with the same settings, with ray tracing enabled, and in some instances on some maps below 20. So yeah, I cannot really recommend an iPhone for this game. It's just not gonna end well. The frame rate is not good. But for the others, one thing I really want to test out is the Dimensity chipset. That one should be good on paper, and on paper the Dimensity 9300 Plus should be the fastest mobile chipset at the moment, with the fastest CPU and fastest GPU. Unfortunately, they're very rare, and I don't know how to get my hands on a Dimensity device. I would love to test one out on this game, and on other games as well. I would love to test it out. Would love to see the difference, since, I mean, if MediaTek starts using NVIDIA graphic cards in their chipsets, my next phone will have a Dimensity chipset if they use NVIDIA. That's just a fact. That would be a dream come true, honestly. I mean, technically Adreno is Radeon. Fun fact, you take Adreno, take the letters, you can actually get, it's an anagram of the Radeon, which is very interesting. Technically a AMD GPU in this thing that I'm currently playing the game on. Well, so far the frame rate is really good. However, I think something is, no, I might be wrong, but I feel like the GPU is kind of holding back, and this is also noticeable temperature-wise. When I turn off ray tracing, the GPU can go well over 75, 76, 78, 80 degrees Celsius. When I turn on ray tracing, that temperature actually drops. So you would think, if you use ray tracing, that's like, you would expect more heat, right? Well, for some weird and odd reason, that's not exactly the case over here. You turn on ray tracing, your temperature drops, even though the GPU should be working harder to deliver good FPS, or should I say the GPU should work harder to render the frames, to render the game. And I will actually show you that in one of the next battles, but I figured out that's one very interesting thing to talk about. Why would that be the case? Why would the GPU behave that way? I think that there is something built in into the Qualcomm chip, something that limits how much voltage and how much power goes to the GPU. I feel like it's kind of limited in the ray tracing how much it can go. Now, why is that the case? Maybe it's actually within the game, I'm not entirely sure. But I really do feel like there is a cap somewhere that limits how much power it can use and how far it can go. I could be wrong though, but that's one interesting theory that I have. I haven't tested out any other ray tracing game at the moment. This is, I think, the only one that's actually available at the moment. I'll try to find more, but I'm very curious to do the ray tracing test with other games, because if that ends up being the case, if I see a temperature drop with other games, then there is something built in that limits the total power usage of the device, which is again understandable and interesting to note. But if you want full power, you just disable ray tracing and the chip just goes wild. You really see how much horsepower it has when you go 120 FPS on this game. So let's play around a little bit more. I mean, as I said, I'll play for a while. I've been playing for 1 hour so far, and you can see the temperatures go up and down. It's usually stable. Battery is now at 20.3. It is funny because the battery actually does cool itself down between the battles, and it's kind of funny to think about, but it does that quite easily. Now, in one instance, when I played the game on a different device, when I enabled ray tracing, I'm not gonna say what device exactly, I mean I already mentioned it previously, I barely had 20 FPS when I was in the middle of this little jungle here, in the middle of this little area. Tree, grass, plus ray tracing, yeah, that does have an impact. However, I get a lot more heat out of the device when I turn off ray tracing and when I'm in this area. Still has good FPS, but again, very fun to see how the heat acts up. And I am in the middle, temperature 69, 68, which honestly, I mean, I'm not complaining about temperature. I still have some really good frame rate with very good resolution, 1080p by the way, full screen 1080p, native resolution, and I'm very happy so far with how it handled it. The moment I leave though, frames go up. Now we are at 63, 64, which honestly is okay. Sometimes I actually feel like it's capped at 60, even though I set at 120 FPS. So there could be something limiting the performance outside of my power to stop it. But I don't really think that's the case. I really think it is just how ray tracing does on the Adreno GPU at the moment. Again, Exynos chipsets will perform better with ray tracing. The Snapdragon chips will outperform the Exynos in raw power, and I feel like that's very interesting when we compare the chipsets. The Adreno, for example, will give you much better FPS than the Eclipse GPU on the Exynos, but the Exynos will give you really good FPS with ray tracing compared to the Adreno GPU. So yeah, it's honestly a fun thing. So if you have a Exynos device, you do have a very capable ray tracing device, because those the Exynos chips, while they tend to run warmer, you know, they have issues, of course. Every chip has its own problem, but when it comes to performance, I really cannot complain about them because they're decent chips. They're still decent chips. And when it comes to ray tracing in this game, you will notice a huge difference. Again, that AMD GPU on this game dominates with ray tracing. Probably the best that I've seen, actually. So kind of happy about that. Even though I don't have a Exynos device at the moment, I'm pretty happy with how the Exynos 2400 performed on this game. Did really well. I also do plan to do the same test with my other Snapdragon devices. I have a 860 and 870, both of which need to be repaired, unfortunately. Maybe I'll buy a new one, I don't know. I honestly have no idea. Things expensive now. But at the same time, I kind of want to see if I can get a Dimensity 9300 device to test it out, because that has the potential to be the best. However, for the game, honestly, it would be more than enough for what I do here. 54, 55 FPS, still decent, honestly. I mean, been playing for an hour now, so obviously there might be some thermal throttling kicking in here and there, which is fine. Temperature of the battery 25 degrees, GPU 72 degrees. That's really good, actually. Not too warm. And the sensor of the on the whole CPU cluster 35. I just noticed it. It's 35 degrees Celsius. So there we go. The processor on this is actually fairly relaxed. Again, the processor is not doing much. Most of the heavy lifting in this game is done by the GPU, as it should. That's what I have this GPU. It should be working. And still, we haven't seen a significant. The best thing, actually, I almost forgot to say, the best thing is you really don't see any FPS, significant FPS dip. When I say significant FPS dip, you don't really notice any dips so low that it makes the game run slow, right? With other devices that I already mentioned today, that's quite obvious. Even some tablets struggle with the game, which was very shocking for me because I did not expect to see that. But that's just how the hardware works. And my apologies if you heard something crack in the background, that was just me getting some water, because I've been here for like 40-50 minutes now, and I usually don't do videos this long, but you know, this deserves to have a good test. So now I will be turning the ray tracing on and off. This is what I was talking about, testing out the heat output. So pay close attention to the heat. We're already at 76 and FPS well over 100, 120 FPS easily, which means that ray tracing is disabled. So now the GPU is flexing its muscles and going full speed. I've been playing for 1 hour and 11 minutes at this moment, which is honestly a respectable time. So far did work really well. The device handled this really solid. Battery is at 26 degrees, which honestly is very chill for a battery. 26 degrees Celsius after gaming for this long is a respectable amount. we are at 82 degrees Celsius. This is what I was talking about. When you let this go full speed, it can definitely deliver. I mean, this is basically what I do with my PC GPU, right? I let it go full speed unlimited. It doesn't have any power saving, obviously. I think you can do the same thing with this chip. I just did not find that option, but you definitely do have some form of power save, you know, limiting how much power is delivered to the GPU. Same thing you have on PC, by the way. And technically you can enhance the FPS and stability a lot more, but for that I would have to do some funny thing with root, and I don't want to do that. Ray tracing is enabled. Let's see what happens to the temperature. It's starting to drop. From 80 we are now at 76. Okay, it did drop 4 degrees. And I can tell you this is about to start dropping even more and more. So this is what I was talking about. Something funny going on in the background here. Even though it does show that actually it goes full speed. Okay, it goes full speed. Okay. As it should. Well, the temperature definitely did kind of go down, but it's still decently high. And don't worry, I mean, this type of temperature, while I understand people being worried about high temperature, it's the same thing you would experience on your desktop GPU. I mean, my GPU, for example, on my desktop, on average, on a good cold day, gets to 70 degrees Celsius easily. Which honestly is its optimal working temperature, and same thing can be said about a phone. However, the problem with phones isn't really the processor or the GPU, it's the battery. Batteries are the first that die to high heat. And that's why I actually use coolers when I'm playing games on this thing, because I keep the battery cold. And I also have bypass charging on this device, which means that I can deliver power to the device directly from the charger, disconnecting the battery and basically using it like a laptop or using it like a PC becomes much easier since it draws power directly from the wall. A very, very good feature that Samsung added onto their devices that I really like. And I see that the ray tracing, it's still enabled. Okay, the ray tracing is still there. And as you can see, for the most part, like 98% of this game is really well made. Absolutely no stutter, no lag, no significant FPS drop. The GPU has been working at a constant full speed from start to finish. The GPU has really been working really well. And you can immediately notice good optimization when the frames are very stable, when the game runs very stable, smooth, and when the utilization is also very stable. There is no bottleneck, everything just works the way it's meant to work, and this is what I'm saying. This game should be an example of how to make a game on a mobile platform. A role model game, and that's why I started with it, because it just deserves to be the role model. It has everything that you need it to have. So we're slowly nearing the end of this little test. I am so far really happy with this game, as I mentioned before. And in the next video, well, I mean, in the next test video, I don't know what game I'll take a look at, but from the next video you will start to see what I was talking about when it comes to the difference in API and stuff. This game runs in Vulkan. Vulkan is definitely the best API that we have at the moment, and more developers should start to utilize Vulkan into their projects. And again, you will see what I'm talking about as the series goes on. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. It was a long video for sure. My apologies if it was a bit rambly and stuff, but I just I just had fun making it, and some things just need to be, I just need to do something, and hopefully this does make players see the difference, where we need to actually push the developers to add Vulkan support and proper care into the game optimization. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe, and with that being said, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.